All right, ready for a deep dive into a world that's a lot more interesting than it might sound at first? We're talking about public procurement
Yeah,
specialists.
it's funny how people hear procurement and they instantly picture mountains of paperwork, right? But it's really not like that. Well, not just like that. It's a surprisingly strategic field.
Really? Okay, so what does a public procurement specialist actually do on a day-to-day basis? It can't all be about, like, finding the cheapest stapler in bulk.
Definitely not. Think of it more like, imagine a government agency needs to replace their entire computer system. The procurement specialist would be the one figuring out exactly what kind of system they need, researching all the different options, handling the contracts.
Oh, so they're doing the negotiating too.
Absolutely, and making sure everything's all above board legally and ethically. It's a lot of responsibility.
So it's about more than just getting the lowest price then.
Right, exactly. It's about getting the best value, which means considering the quality, any long-term costs, even stuff like a company's sustainability practices or labor standards.
Wow, so there's a pretty big social impact element to this role too then.
For sure, you're making sure those resources are being used responsibly. And it's not all just sitting in an office either. You're dealing with people constantly, different teams within your own organization, the suppliers bidding on contracts, even regulatory bodies.
Sounds like it could get pretty interesting, actually. RoleCatcher mentioned that technology is playing a much bigger role in this field now, too, with things like AI and automation, even blockchain. Not exactly what comes to mind with government work.
Yeah, it's definitely evolving. When you think about how much data is involved, contracts, bids, supplier information, it makes sense that technology is coming in to streamline things, hopefully make things more transparent too.
So we're talking analytical skills, and a good grasp of technology. That's a lot. But what about the downsides? Is this kind of career a good fit for everyone?
Good question. Like any job, it has its pros and cons. Job security is a big plus, though governments and large organizations are always going to need skilled procurement specialists. And the earning potential is definitely there, especially as you gain experience.
And you get that satisfaction of knowing you're helping to make sure things are being done right, ethically.
Right, exactly. That said, there's also a lot of pressure that comes with handling public funds. You have to be able to make tough decisions, and yeah, there's going to be some bureaucracy to deal with.
Oh, I bet. That's probably the part I'd find the toughest.
It's unavoidable, really. But that's why you need to be comfortable working with complex regulations, thinking through the ethical side of every decision. It's not as simple as just getting a bargain.
So it sounds like you need to be detail-oriented, but also able to see the bigger picture, right? Someone who likes a challenge.
Definitely. It takes a certain kind of personality to really thrive in this kind of role.
So for someone who's thinking, hey, this actually sounds pretty cool, what does it take to actually become a public procurement specialist? Is a business degree the only way in?
Well, a good understanding of business is definitely important, but RoleCatcher actually highlighted a few other skills that aren't as obvious, but they're super important in this field.
Okay, yeah, like what?
Number one, active listening.
Active listening. Seriously.
I know it sounds basic, right? But when you're constantly talking to different people with different priorities, being able to really hear what they're saying and what they're not saying,
Hmm.
it's huge.
So you're not just listening to their words, you're understanding their needs, their concerns, even if they're not spelling it out.
Exactly. Then number two would be critical thinking.
Okay, that makes sense.
You're always running into these tricky situations, right? You're evaluating bids, you're trying to assess risks, and every decision you make has these big financial and ethical implications. So you need to be able to think on your feet, analyze things quickly.
So it's not enough to just follow the rules. You need to know when you might need to bend them a little, or find a creative solution that still works within the rules.
Exactly. And finally, you've got negotiation skills.
Yeah, that one seems kind of obvious.
It's more nuanced than it sounds, though. I mean, you're not just haggling over price. You're negotiating the terms of contracts, managing those relationships with suppliers, really trying to find solutions that work for everyone, including the public.
Right, right. So everyone wins. RoleCatcher also had those sample profiles. Remember those? They showed what a career path in this field could actually look like, entry level, all the way up to senior positions.
And you can really see how the skills we're talking about come into play differently at each level.
Yeah.
Like an entry-level person might do a lot of market research, evaluate bids, very detail-oriented stuff.
Right, whereas a senior specialist might be the one leading a team, coming up with those big picture procurement strategies,
Yeah.
handling the really high value contracts.
Exactly. It shows how experience and certifications, all that continuous learning, it can really pay off.
Speaking of standing out, but what about those interview questions RoleCatcher talked about? I think they called them curveball questions, ones you might not expect in a typical interview. What kind of stuff should people be ready for?
Well, they're going to want to know more than just your work history. Be prepared to talk about how you've handled tough situations in the past, how you make sure you're staying compliant with regulations, even how you approach those ethical gray areas.
So they want to see how you think, how you solve problems.
Exactly. Can you think on your feet? Are you asking the right questions? Do you get the big picture, or are you just focused on the bottom line?
It's really about showing them you can handle the pressure. This is good stuff.
Hmm.
Okay, so you've wowed them in the interview, you've landed the job. How do you really become the procurement specialist everyone wants on their team?
Well, RoleCatcher talked about certifications being a big factor, like a way to show you're really serious about this career path.
Right, like a stamp of approval from the procurement gods or something. Which ones are the most valuable?
The Certified Professional in Public Procurement, the CPPP, that one carries a lot of weight. It shows a good understanding of all those core procurement principles.
So that's the one if you really want to work in the public sector specifically.
Definitely. And then there's the Certified Professional in Supply Management, the CPSM. That one's got a broader focus more on the whole supply chain from start to finish.
Okay, so if you're interested in the bigger picture, how everything fits together.
That's the one. And for people set on government roles, there's the Certified Public Procurement Officer, the CPPO.
Ah, so those are the big three then.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they all involve some pretty serious coursework exams. It's not just a piece of paper. It shows you're really dedicated to learning and growing in your career.
Makes sense. So what about networking? Is LinkedIn the be-all and end-all for procurement folks, or are there better ways to connect?
LinkedIn's definitely a good tool, but honestly, RoleCatcher made a good point about industry events, conferences. Those are where you can actually meet people face to face, have those real conversations.
And maybe even snag a mentor, right? Someone who can show you the ropes.
Exactly. Don't underestimate a good mentor. Especially when you're just starting out, it's invaluable.
Totally. Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to those tools RoleCatcher mentioned, the AI resume builder specifically. That one sounds like it could be a game changer.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty cool. So imagine you find the perfect job poster, right? Everything you're looking for. This tool analyzes the language they use in the description and helps you tailor your resume to match.
No more wondering if you're using the right keywords or if your resume is even making it past those applicant tracking systems.
Exactly. It takes out all the guesswork, helps you stand out.
That's awesome. Well, this has been fascinating. We've talked about what it takes to be a public procurement specialist, busted some myths, learned about some awesome resources.
And I think we can all agree it's definitely not your average desk job.
Not even close. It's about making smart decisions, being a strong negotiator, making sure things are done the right way. For anyone who's looking for a career that's challenging and rewarding, honestly, public procurement is worth a look. Until next time, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.